Welcome to today's Fireside Chat with Jesse. I am joined today by Reuben from Tomorrow Zone. Thanks, Deb, for joining me today.
You're welcome. So great to be with you, Jesse. I've been looking forward to this conversation. It's always fun to catch up with you.
No, me too, and absolutely, Deb. So thanks you again for, or I guess I should say thank you again for taking the time. So just to kind of jump right in here, tell me a little bit more. Obviously, a lot of people in the industry know about you, but there's people in the industry that might not know about you. So for those people who aren't familiar with Reuben Creative, Tomorrow Zone, tell me a little bit more about yourself, if you don't mind.
Sure. So, I'm Reuben, and I live in Minnesota. I'm in Minnetonka, just outside of Minneapolis. So it's been a pretty interesting year or so. um, I have been in business for just over 7 years now on my own. And I started out my business as Reuben Creative, and that's still the name of my LLC. But I'm doing business as Tomorrow Zone. Tomorrow Zone, I just launched that brand in 2020. And it's all about helping people think differently about the future so that they can make awesome decisions today, whether for themselves, their team, their employees, their customers, or companies. I think if we don't understand where technology is going and we don't know how to track the trends,
right,
then we're going to be surprised by disruption. And we want to avoid that as much as we can.
That's great. And especially in this industry, I mean, I got in it when I was 23, and it's still the same kind of, I've been selling as a service provider into this industry for 16 years, and you're getting the same objections. But then again, it's like, come on, people. And then you throw in that disruptor of the pandemic, and then it's like, maybe your eyes will open up a little bit more now.
Oh, yeah. Okay, that just sounded totally Minnesotan. I can't help it.
Okay.
Yeah, so I got in equipment finance back in the day with Wells Fargo as a application developer, and over the years I've seen massive changes, and I think disruption is never far from us. And so I think it's important that we're always thinking about being prepared for that, but also being eyes wide open. I'm not about trying to scare people about the future. Um, you know, it's less about robot armies taking over humanity and more about how might we think about future possibilities so that we can make time today to take the actions that help us to shape our future. Because I think the best way, and I've heard it said, the best way to predict your future is to create it. I
Yeah.
don't think that's an impossibility. And so that's a lot of what Tomorrow Zone is all about. Just a way of, how we think about things, very future focused technology strategy consultancy.
No, and that's exciting. So, as from a consulting perspective, you can sit there and you can paint a picture, but it's also you try to be delicate because some of these people have put these processes in place, and it's a fine line you got to walk, right? Because you never want to offend anyone. Um, but it's also one of those things where just ask the question, well, what if you don't do that, right?
Mhm.
And that's one of the things that, with some of these side projects I work on here and there, where it's like you have that as opposed to you're selling for a particular organization, right? Where you can ask those questions. And I find if you phrase things the right way, Deb, that typically some of those barriers come down. But yeah.
Yeah, and I think, one of the things I've learned along the way is, rather than telling people where they need to change, helping them to see it,
Yeah.
facilitating an environment to help them see it. And if it's a group, helping them see it together.
Yep.
Because the last thing we want to do is turn people off to changes that are needed. But if they can't see the importance of it, they're not going to buy in anyway. They're just going to resist it. So,
No,
if
that
we can
makes complete sense.
identify where the problems are and then work together and
Right.
co-create that big picture of the future possibilities, it
Mhm.
changes everything in that discussion.
No, I agree. So I want to pivot just a little bit from that. So going from, you
Mhm.
said you've been in consulting for 7 years.
Mhm.
what was that transition like, going from, being an FTE for one organization to, okay, I want to be a consultant. I know a lot. I know a lot of people. I know what I can do. How am I going to get paid next month? Like, if you don't mind, just talk about that.
Yeah, you know, so this was an interesting journey because so I started out, like I said, with Wells Fargo as an application designer and developer, had to learn equipment finance end to end to even be able to do that. Was then
Right.
recruited to be part of the startup of TCF Equipment Finance. So I was with them before they even funded their first deal. Always
Okay, I
doing
did not know
stuff.
that. Okay.
Yeah, always doing stuff in between business and technology, very strategic. So it was an
Okay.
interesting partnership with the CEO. He'd be like, I want to take the company this way. I'll meet you there. You figure out the tech stuff, and so designed and built all the applications they built their company on for the first 7 years.
Oh,
And
wow.
within 2 years was looking for, how do we replace this? What's next? How do we scale? And so I was always looking for what's next. And that's kind of been the theme of my career. And I often, especially in the equipment finance industry, found myself ahead of time. Like I remember talking to folks about Salesforce in 2003 and talking about customer experience journey mapping in 2005. And people were looking at me with, like deer in the headlights. What the heck are you talking about? It's all the rage now. So I was always like very intrigued and curious about where things are going and also what are new possibilities. And so, in that role in the finance company, I was blessed to have the opportunity to interact with so many brilliant people from outside of the company.
Okay.
And those interactions really fired me up. And so I started to realize, okay, I want to do things where I can collaborate across divisions and across companies. And so I left TCF, probably the worst time in history to do that, 2008, and launched my first consulting business. So, yep, learning forward. Um, Fortunately, I was able to land a project that, sustained me through those 2 really freaky years.
Yep.
And then I was recruited to join a software company that serves this industry as well as commercial lending. So
Okay.
I was a product manager for Capital Stream. You may remember that
Yeah.
product has
Yeah.
been around for a while. So
Yeah.
that was a really cool experience. So as a senior product manager, saw this industry from a whole different lens, but also had exposure to other elements of commercial finance. So it was really interesting. I thought it would be way more creative and exciting. Also, I was working on a virtual team. So
Ah,
I was never with my team in person as a product manager. My engineering team was in India,
okay.
and the rest of our product management team was in every time zone in the US.
That's
So it was a
unique.
very interesting working situation. I mean, this was 2010.
Okay.
And so I've been working remotely since 2010. And even before that, I was working remote without permission. Shh, we won't tell anyone. Oh, I guess we just did. But it required me to get really comfortable with the digital world. But also I started to do a lot of experimenting on my own time because I was bored during 9 to 5, honestly. And so I was experimenting with virtual worlds and where are things going with technology, and and I was also running the award program for ELFA at the
Okay.
time, the Ops and Tech Excellence Award program. And I started to see things coming through the program and things happening with the conversations that I was having. And I'm like, okay, this cloud thing that's coming along, there's something to that. And I
Right.
don't think that's a passing trend. I think that's a long-term trend. And so I started to think about my future in relation to that tech trend that I was watching on the edges of our industry. Because back
Mhm.
then, a lot of finance companies thought that's not a possibility. We can't
Yeah.
can't because
Yep.
infinity. But I was starting to see some movement on the edges of the industry, and that's where you usually see disruptive innovations happening. And I just got to thinking, if I stay where I am, I'll be obsolete in just a matter of years. And so that's what really inspired me to take the leap into my own consulting business. I knew my next step was into my own thing because I had felt like I maxed out. I'd gone as far as possible where I was. You know, it was a great team. You know, I still love the people I worked with. But I was really looking for more, and I needed autonomy, and I wanted to have an environment where nobody could tell me that I couldn't experiment with whatever technology I wanted. I could study whatever I want. I could choose who I want to work with, collaborate with. And so I started thinking not just about, well, what do I know and how can I apply that in consulting, but how do I want to live my life? And how do I
Right.
want to grow professionally and personally? That was a really big part of my thought process to going on my own. And so it took me from the time I made the decision to go on my own, and I was, talking with my first consulting opportunity. It was a pretty huge project. Um, and until I actually left the software company, that was a 9-month process to exit gracefully. And I wanted to finish the release that I was working on.
Right.
So that's kind of my thought process to get into my own thing. And I took the leap, having lined up my first contract. So that really helped to relieve some of the scariness
Yeah, of
of
course,
making that
because you're
leap.
just like,
But
what's going on here? Like,
yeah, to move from, a regular paycheck to it's all up to you. Every expense is up to you. It's a different realm, but also it opens so much more opportunity because it's up to you and there is no ceiling
right.
on what you can achieve. It's up to you. So
And
I like that. I haven't looked back.
so I guess from a work life perspective,
Hmm.
I don't want to I want to make sure I focus on what you just said, because I think that you were probably more prepared for what happened in 2020 than anyone else, just based on that. But going from that, like from a work life perspective, even though you were still virtual, um,
Hmm.
being a consultant, does that give you more free time, or do you feel like you have less free time?
It ebbs and flows really.
Okay.
Because, when you're running your own business, you have to constantly be evolving with the times. And, I try to stay on top of what's going on innovation wise. So there's a lot of that going on too. Um, I think that sometimes it does give me time, more time than I would have if I was working for somebody else. And sometimes it seems to take more because I do think sometimes, and maybe you run into this yourself from time to time, I don't know, but if I was just working for somebody else, would it be easier to just turn off at 5 p.m.? And for me, I've been working out of my home for 7 years and more, actually. I had to create those boundaries. So the biggest disruption, personally, that happened to me beyond COVID in the past year was we moved, and we were going to move into a house, but COVID disruption, that plan went off the table because we weren't even able to go and look at houses when we wanted to. um, and so I used to have a door, and my office was in the other side of the house from where we would hang out most of the time and where our bedroom was and everything. So I had a very clear physical separation and boundary, and it was much easier to turn off. We're temporarily in a 2-bedroom apartment, so
Oh,
try to have a
oh,
boundary there.
yeah, no, I
It's
mean,
much harder to have that work life balance because and then pile COVID on top of that, and now we have these days that are pretty much the same day after day until you're like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday,
right.
Thursday. What day is it again? Because they all seem the same. So that's been a struggle, honestly, for a lot of different reasons. But over the years, I found coping mechanisms to try to manage that. And one thing that helps is when I own my own business, I can call the shots.
Right.
So if I don't want to take meetings until 10 a.m., I don't. That's my choice. Nobody can tell me that I have to. So yeah, it gives me more flexibility.
That makes complete sense, and I apologize. I had my dog locked in my office, and then he decided to let himself out. So you saw the
Wow,
reflection
your
there. That's
dog's got skills. Can he work a
my
lock and everything?
yeah. No, I don't dare to lock him in there because then he'll just destroy things. But anyhow, that's where you probably saw me. I'm like, oh, come on, man. But joys of doing these things from home. But
Yeah, I've had
but you
meetings
know,
joined by kids, dogs, family members, you name
and
it,
it never
cats.
seems to fail. People decide to show up at the house, or contractors, because we, like I said before, we just went through like this 3 year house build, and people decide to show up where it's like, oh, okay, I got 3 hours worth of virtual meetings, and they show up 5 minutes before and
Yep.
then in between, and you're just like, I'll literally be on one of these, and there'll be a person knocking at that window, and I'm like, go away. Like, how do
I,
you do that underneath the whatever?
I
It's
was
the
running a virtual future workshop for executives, and that was the day that our building decided they needed to do a fire alarm testing. And the fire alarm for our floor is right outside our unit. That was like probably the most stress. Trying to negotiate with them. Can you hold off until it
Well,
worked out, but man.
if anything, now 2020 hopefully brought to the realization that those things happen, and you need
Yeah.
to chill out when
Yes.
things happen.
Yes. My favorite quote from one of my collaborators this year was, yeah, it's like the whole business world has had to take a chill pill.
Until you see an executive show up in like a hoodie and a, like, and you're just like, okay, that's a little maybe too chill, but hey, whatever, to each their own.
They can still make awesome happen.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess going into 2020 was a little bit of a shakeup for me. Obviously, I moved jobs and started doing some consulting stuff too. What
Mhm.
did that do for you, Deb, in
Oh my
regards
gosh.
to the projects you were working on? And then it's like, okay, you can't get in front of people, you can't travel. So
Yeah, yeah. That was a really huge shakeup for me, probably like a lot of people. I mean, I'm not alone in this, but so I was doing technology strategy consulting, and I was also building a speaking business. And I'd been collaborating with Monitor, so I
okay,
designed their Monitor Disrupted
yeah,
series. So I
mhm,
co-founded that with Lisa, and so being on stages and generating revenue that way was completely disrupted for me. Um, I also was doing a lot of really, creative sticky note flinging, ideation, and problem solving workshops with clients in my technology strategy consulting. And that's not going to happen in this environment.
no,
So, no more traveling to go to events, no more generating leads that way, no more doing on-site consulting, no more emceeing events, no more keynotes. My calendar cleared in a matter of days. It felt devastating. I'm not gonna lie. That it was really, really, really scary. The other thing that happened is, a lot of my work is the upfront visioning
yeah,
stage of things and working with companies to get on the same page about the big picture about where they're going and helping them to figure out their roadmap, people, process, technology, holistic view. And those strategic initiatives, all the opportunities that I had, and I had some really close to closing. We were like, starting to talk about when's our start dates, and
right,
totally backburnered indefinitely because most of the companies in our industry needed to turn their focus to firefighting
oh yeah,
and
absolutely,
survival, and so it was really, really, really freaky for several weeks. And and it never stopped being intense for probably the first several months. um so what happened for me is, I saw my the sources of revenue that I had going into 2020 and my strategic plan for 2020 out the door, just done,
yeah,
irrelevant instantly. And so I had to step back and rethink and reimagine for this new environment. I don't know if you saw the article I just wrote for Monitors magazine, but I talked about the story of the Choluteca Bridge in Honduras. And
I haven't had a chance to read that yet.
okay, well, I'll keep it quick, but I think it really relates to what happened to a lot of us because of COVID. So in Honduras, they're subject to hurricanes and a lot of storms in their environment, and they have a lot of bridges in their country. And so one of the big questions they were trying to ask is, how might we build a bridge that can withstand a Category 5 hurricane? And so they brought together the best and brightest engineering and architectural minds to try to solve this problem. And sure enough, they did. They built a bridge over that river. It was beautiful, sturdy, and sure enough, I think it was around 1998, Category 5 hurricane comes through all over the country. The bridges are destroyed. It's devastating. This bridge is still standing. Minor damage only. And that's awesome. But the problem is the strength of the storm and how fast it hit brought so much water and flooding in such a concentrated time that it caused the river to completely divert its path. It carved a whole new path around the bridge. And so now we have this beautiful and sturdy structure standing over an expanse of dry ground.
Interesting.
Instantly made irrelevant. And so you think about, it wasn't that the bridge was bad. The bridge was awesome. But the landscape has shifted.
Right.
In our personal life.
Or they didn't think a couple steps ahead.
Yeah. And so you think about the ripple effects of COVID and the shutdowns, lockdowns, the contactless delivery requirements, contactless payment, all of these things that we had in our society, in our personal lives, in our business models, suddenly disrupted, suddenly made irrelevant, not because they were bad, but because the world has changed.
Right.
That's how fast disruption can happen. And so, for me, it was a matter of stepping back and thinking, okay, the landscape has shifted. And instead of wasting time thinking about what have I lost, waiting for things to go back, or even answering the question, when do I think things will return to normal? I skipped that question and said, okay, the world is different now. And what I thought I was going to do this year is not possible. And I don't know when it will be possible again. And I'm not going to waste brain space trying to figure that out. So I did my future workshop on myself. And I came up with 6 different versions of the future for how this might play out. And I looked at it across multiple dimensions. And I remember doing this. I think it was a Saturday, but it was April 9th, whatever day that was. But I won't forget that day.
Is your husband looking at you like, what are you doing? Or did he, when you do these things, is he kind of like,
okay, yeah, he's just like, she's nerding out again. I'm not going to try to explain it.
I'm sorry. I had to throw that in. I'd be like, what are you doing? She's lost it. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I was in my office with the door shut, just like, figuring this out. But what I came away with, just came away with the understanding when I saw the themes that, the best thing I can do right now is double down on digital, virtual, and build as if this thing is going to go on for a couple of years. And I hope that I'm pleasantly surprised and that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
But if it does, then I'm prepared.
No, I mean,
if it doesn't, I already know how to do business in person.
Right. And this is such an in-person industry, but, I think maybe we'll have to tackle this another time, but there's so many things that I think the sales methodology, it's changed. There is no longer one of those people that call me up and say, Jesse, hey, we have this opportunity. And I book a, flight and I'm on a plane the next week. We're at least getting through discovery or requirements virtual.
Yeah, I'm doing full on technology strategy workshops, completely virtual. So I've done 3 for one of my clients who totally believed that remote work didn't work pre-COVID. They had purchased a new building because they outgrew their space because they demand everybody to be on site. So fast forward to March and suddenly we're learning that maybe we were wrong. And I asked
Yeah.
them, about that plan to move to a new space. Like, yeah, we're trying to get rid of that building now because we have too much space in our current location, because we have found that remote does work.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they wanted to do their workshops in person. They're like, oh, we've got we can do it socially distant. We got a big room or whatever. Like, and I'd sold them a virtual workshop, and I just said, that's not what you bought. Let's try this. And I took them through my virtual visual facilitation. And within 90 minutes, they're like, we can't wait for the next session, because they
Okay.
realized I don't have to burn time being on a plane to be in the
Right.
same room with my colleagues to have just as impactful of a discussion. I'm sleeping in my own bed at night. I am not, I only need to be in the discussions that pertain to me. Like, you can totally redesign those interactions, but it's actually reimagining it. It's not repurposing what we do in the physical world and just pasting it onto digital tools. It's reimagined. I can stretch timelines. I can think of time as elastic. I can think of it as modular. I can mix and match and configure it now.
Um,
Totally different
I love how
experience.
your brain works, Deb. I think I need to spend more time just talking to you, so some of that stuff can just kind of rub off on me. But I'm hoping that for this year, obviously, I think the majority of stuff in the first quarter, everything's gone virtual from a conference perspective.
Mhm.
I'm hoping towards the end of the year, this stuff gets kind of sorted out. We get things happen, and we can be in front of people, because as much as I like doing these virtual things, there's nothing
Mhm.
better than shaking someone's hand and
Oh
being in
yeah.
front.
I
But
think, we're always severely disappointed if we expect digital to replace one for one the human
right,
experience that we have when we're in person, because it can't.
right,
It simply
right,
can't. But
yeah,
it can help you achieve a lot of your goals if
oh
you
yeah,
can embrace that it's different, and it also presents so many more possibilities
oh
for
yeah,
how you can
absolutely,
interact.
yes,
I've been meeting more people just traversing the virtual world this year than I did when I was running around on, and on and off of planes throughout the year and going to events. It's been really it's really been blowing my mind, actually, how
hmm,
effective navigating networking has been for me in the virtual space. But I mean, it's my comfort zone.
right,
So that's not the case for everybody.
right. And it's how do we get more of those people who aren't comfortable turning on their cameras to actually engage. So
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that was an interesting thing to witness. So I chair the Technology Innovation Working Group for ELFA, and so we have like 18 really bright people that we meet once a month and just talk about what's going on in technology and
right,
trends and what does that mean for our industry. And so I've been leading these little roundtables every month for 2 years. And the first year we're using Zoom. I've been using Zoom since 2017.
okay,
But usually I was the only one on camera and maybe one other person. Fast forward to April, and we started to see just about every single person in our the last probably 6 to 8 months, every single time every person's on video. It's just like really transformed the way that we interact. And I think adoption of these modes of communication and collaboration has advanced 3 to 5 years. We're light years ahead of where we were last year. My business
yeah,
model,
no,
Jesse, would not be possible last year.
right.
It's only because of the landscape shift that I can do what I'm doing now.
That's kind of crazy. I joined JDR December 1st, right? A 20-year-old organization. And it's like, you guys have teams? Well, yeah, but we use a conference line. I'm like, why? Let's use teams. And then it's like,
Hmm.
let's turn on those cameras, gentlemen. Let's go. And it's like, and
Yeah.
it's getting used to it. But
Yeah.
it just makes it more personable, especially because when you can't be in front of people, you know, at least it gives you somewhat of a connection. So,
Hmm.
well, perfect, Deb. Well, I appreciate you taking the time today. I have a feeling that we'll be having a little few more of these, because this is just kind of scratching the surface in regards to the ideas that I have and the ideas that you have. So I
Yeah,
appreciate your time today, and
absolutely.
thank
Hey,
you.
Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year to you too, Deb. And I look forward to hopefully we can maybe share an adult beverage later this year at a conference. I'm hoping.
Yeah, and if not, we can sure connect in the virtual world. So
Absolutely.
thanks for having me. Let's make
No
awesome
problem.
happen again.
All right. Excellent. Thank you again.
All right, bye-bye.